Alright, let's get started on the Chrome Dinosaur game. And if you don't know what that is, let me show you really quick. I just turn Wi-Fi off and then try to go anywhere. And it gives me the Chrome Dinosaur game. You press space and it starts you running. And it gets faster and faster the further you go into the game. You have to jump over these things. And obviously there's a little high score and a running total, which is probably just a timer. Because frankly, you're just as long as you stay alive, that's progress in the game. And eventually, if I hit the cactus or the things I'm supposed to jump over, then I lose. Okay, so that's what we're going for. Now, I'm not going to create it exactly the same as this, and I'm also not following any tutorial myself. I'm just going to be making this the best way I know how with the skills that I've already learned. And I'm hoping to show and share some of those skills with you. So first off, let's just talk about what features we want to include. Now, let's make a little bit simplified version of this. Let's make a version where you just jump over things. You don't duck under things. Let's open up our text editor. There's an extension on Chrome I just installed. And look at that, it still works even without the internet. Let's start designing this, okay? And we'll do it piece by piece. We'll just start adding the most basic parts of this game, and then it'll get more complicated as we go, and that's how every project I make goes. So let's add some pseudocode. First I'll put a little HTML tag here, as well as a script tag. But inside of the script tag, that's where I'm going to put the design. Okay, let's save this. Dinosaur clone game. Or dinosaur game, whatever, .html. Okay, so the pseudocode, let's put it right in here. So the game we're going to be creating only has one control. That control is to jump. And the object that we make jump doesn't move left or right, it just jumps up and down. So let's say that the user can make an object jump. Gravity pulls the object back down. And let's see if we can get that part to work first, but once we get that, we will make objects move toward the controllable object, and over time, they get faster and faster. If the objects collide with the dinosaur, the game ends. And let's also add a scoreboard. And that's basically all there is to it. So let's start with making an object that can jump. Let's start with the div, which is just the most basic element that can be customized to move around, or you can group lots of elements together inside of a div. Anyway, this div is just going to be a block for now. Let's have a width and a height. So let's say its style is width 40, height 40, background color red. Okay, let's save that and run it. All right, so we got ourselves a red square. It's positioned up towards the top left. So let's change that. Let's make it so it's always near the center of the screen. And we can do that by using percentages rather than pixel location. But first thing we'll have to do is make it position absolute. So absolute position, and then make this further out. And then its left position, let's just say 40%. And its top position, let's say 55%. So this will be less than the halfway line. So there we go. Maybe we want it a little higher. Let's try 45%, so it's above the halfway line. Because the beginning of the square is actually where it's drawing it. So I think that's a good spot. Okay, let's also draw a line below that. another div. This one will be, oh, and by the way, let's add an ID. Let's say ID equals dinosaur. And this one, the ID will be ground. And the style, let's set width of this is actually going to be 100%, so as wide as the screen goes. And then the height, let's just try 5 pixels for now. And background color, black. And position, absolute. If we don't make it absolute position, then if we try to put it at a specific point on the screen, it won't actually work. So let's set it to be left 0% and top. We want it to be basically exactly where that is and where that ends. So if we say 45%, let's just see where that puts it. It doesn't work. Let's see, ground style 100%. And it looks like I forgot to put the word height there. That was silly of me. So there is our line. We actually want it to be below this though, right? So instead, we could just make it a higher number here. We could say like 50, and then it looks like, that just happens to work out nicely. But you'll notice if I change the height of this, you'll notice that it doesn't always stay sitting on that line. And that's because this square is a set pixel height and width, not a percent. So maybe we should change that to be a percent instead of a pixel amount. Let's do 5% for the width and 5% for the height. Now this is no longer going to be a square, you'll notice, unless we are actually shrunk down there. And it looks like we got a little bit of a gap there. You know what? I'm okay with it like this. So we'll play around with this later anyway when we change it to be an image. But for now, let's just work on the gravity. Okay, so let's make this jump when we press the space bar. And we can just say window.onKeyDown equals function. And we'll pass in a variable. And we can just say if e.keycode equals 32, we'll say alert the user hi. And let's just test that. If I press the space bar, it says hi. So it looks like that works. If I press enter, it doesn't do anything, which is good. We only want it to do something if they press the space bar. Okay. But you could also make it work if they press the up arrow. Maybe that's a good idea. Let's try that one too. So I don't know what the up arrow code is, so let's just alert the user. When they press any key, we'll just say whatever the key code is. So now I saved that. And if I press the left arrow, that's 37. If I press the right arrow, that's 39. The up arrow, it looks like is 38. So let's try that one. So we'll say if e.keycode equals 32 for space, or if e.keycode equals 38 for the up arrow, then it will do what we want it to do. Okay. So let's try it one more time. Space says hi, up arrow says hi, but nothing else says hi, which is good. Okay. All right, so what do we want it to do when we press that? Well, we want to make the object jump. We want to simulate gravity. Give it a little bit of upward force, and then watch it come back down slowly. All right, so let's try to just make this change its position for now when I press that space bar. So first off, we need to have access to that element, and we can use its ID to get that. So let's say var dino, you can name it whatever you want, obviously, equals document.getElement by ID, and then we'll say dinosaur. Okay, now I can say if they press the spacebar or the up arrow, then dino.style.top equals, and right now it's at 45%. So 40% would be a little higher than that. Oops, let me put that in quotes. So 40%, save that, and then refresh it. And if I press space, it looks like it works. That's probably not as high as we want it to be, but we're making progress. Okay, so what we actually want to do is have this gradually go upward and then come back down. So let's set up an interval so that it's changing a little bit each time rather than just setting it to be a specific value. So let's start by saying, let's make a variable to represent its current y position. So let's just do that right here. We'll say we have a variable called dino y, and then it's going to start out as 45, and then later it's going to change according to that interval when they press the spacebar. So let's say set interval, and then the function, and let's just make this happen every 10 milliseconds, so 100 times a second. Let's make it go down 1. So we'll say dino y minus equals 1. Okay. And then down below, right here, we have to change this to be whatever dino y is plus a % sign. And I also need to move this inside of that interval so that it continues to redraw the object according to its updated position. So let's refresh and press space. And as you can see, it looks like the interval's working, but it never came back down. All right, we need to change this, obviously. In order to simulate gravity, we need it to go upward and then come right back down after a little while. So a good way to simulate gravity is to create a parabolic function, an upside-down parabola, using two variables, using a dependent variable, which is our y position, and an independent variable, which it depends on, and that's the x. In this case, x does not mean how far from the left to the right it is, because our character is just going to stay in one position. It's going to look like he's moving because the ground beneath him is going to be moving. So our x position isn't necessarily going to be how far we are from the left to the right, but our x independent variable here is actually just going to be how many steps of this interval have happened. So we need to keep track of that. Let's say var steps starts out at 0, and then each time that this interval repeats, we'll increase it by 1. And we no longer want to use this changing the dinosaur's y position by 1. So let's remove that. And we need to say dino y now equals itself with an adjustment, and that adjustment is going to be negative. So let's say minus equals change in y. And change in y doesn't exist yet, so we need to create a function for that depends on x. So on the steps variable, I should say. So let's say var change in y equals get change in y, and then pass steps, and then let's create that function. Get change y steps. Now, I've already tested this quite a bit and found what I think is a pretty good simulation of gravity, and it's this function right here. So these numbers are pretty arbitrary. You're welcome to test different ones, see if you like anything better than that, but for now, let's just return this change value, save it, and test it out. And it works, except, of course, the parabola continues on forever, so we need to tell it to stop at some point. So let's just say, as soon as the y position gets back to its starting position of 45, let's not have it run that function anymore. Let's clear the interval. So in order to do that, we need to set this up as a variable, this interval. So let's say jump interval equals that. And then we also need to create that. So var jump interval. So in here, we'll just say if dino y happens to be greater than 45%, that means it actually overshot it. Let's say if it happens to be greater than 45, set it back to 45. And then we'll just end it. Let's put this inside curly brackets so that I can do multiple things. So we just want to clear the jump interval. So we say clear interval and then pass in jump interval. Okay, let's test that out now. So I press the space and now it stops. So we've got a little simulation of gravity. And like I was saying, you can change these around. Change that to be a 5, change this to be a 5, change this to be a 25, and test that out. See how that's just a little baby jump. So a higher number here, 12, 12, and then 12 squared is 144. That seems to work nicely. You could try different ones. You could try 100 with 10s here. So depending on how hard you want it to be, how high you want the guy to be able to jump, you can change those numbers.